and gentlemen, the situation is still the same. He's out there and we're in here.
Is it really the case that the man that you are searching for as the killer is the sort of man of whom you are afraid he could strike again?
There's a possibility he may, yes.
Barrowlands nightclub in Glasgow's East End.
A dog being taken on an early morning walk by his owner found the body. She had been beaten and strangled.
Police said he was polite, well-spoken, and might make reference to the Bible. Newspapers dubbed him Bible John.
The notorious Bible John, who terrorized Glasgow.
I'm Vicky McClure. I've spent years playing police officers on screen. My husband Johnny Owen is a historian and filmmaker. We share a passion for finding out the truth.
Together, we're going on a journey back in time to explore murder cases that have changed modern Britain.
Oh God. He's basically saying, I'll do time for these people, but when I come out, I'm going to kill them. Whether it's unsolved crimes...
Councillor Cochrane was the victim. He wasn't the perpetrator of any crime.
Miscarriages of justice.
The last words he said just before he was executed was, Christie done it.
Wow.
Gosh. Or milestone cases that have changed the law.
The government agreed to not disclose it to the public.
Wow.
We'll examine what really happened and how the legacy of these crimes continues to be felt today.
I'm a McClure.
You are a McClure.
So you're in my motherland now.
I am, yeah.
Got my own tartan. We've come to Glasgow to discover why Scotland's most notorious serial killer, Bible John, was never caught. My information and facts on Glasgow, the Barrowlands, Bible John, is very limited. I want to know who his three victims were, what went wrong that meant they never had justice, and what's the lasting impact on the city.
Glasgow certainly had a reputation, and a lot of that did begin really in the sort of late 60s, early 70s.
Glasgow was in decline then. Unemployment was high, and thousands of the poorest lived in tenements, tiny crumbling Victorian flats. Looking for a distraction, they went dancing.
They loved their dancing and they loved letting their hair down.
Yeah.
But the place where the working class mostly went was the Barrowlands.
Built in 1934, the Barrowland is still a venue for live music, as well as home to a market called the Barras.
Here we go, here's the world famous Barrowlands.
We're here to talk about Bible John.
Yes.
And this is where it all began. It feels quite dark.
Well, this is where he sort of like found his victims, really.
I think for me, I want to concentrate on the memory of these women more than the memory of Bible John and why they never got justice.
We need to start at the beginning and find out who the first victim was and what happened to her.
So here we are in the city centre of Glasgow at the Mitchell Library.
This looks nothing like my library.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
Right, I'll check out the newspapers from the time and you have a look at the microfilm records.
Sounds like a plan.
So you've got kind of the world encapsulated here that gives you an idea of what's going on around these murders. You've got a cake from the Beatles, George is 29, women moving into the workplace. a Vietnam story. It's amazing, really.
I mean, it's strange seeing newspapers anyway now. They relied on them so heavily.
February the 24th, 1968. It's the first victim. Yeah, it's Patricia Docker. Police last night hunted the killer of a young mother who was found naked in the lanes with strangled.
Patricia Docker's body was discovered in an alleyway close to her parents' home.
She had a 4-year-old son. It's very sad. It's always a line that gets you, really.
She was a loving mother, and she's been tragically lost.
She was also an auxiliary nurse.
She had been beaten and strangled.
Patricia was separated from her husband, but they've written about it like this.
She had a wedding ring on the third finger of her right hand, rather than the left hand, which is where you put it to show you're married. It's kind of like saying she was going out and she was trying to hide the fact that she was married.
Like that makes any difference to the fact that she's just been brutally murdered. In the picture there, her body, and you can see the police officers.
Arrowed, the spot where Patricia's body was found. It's quite striking. There's photographers at every stage. The press have done a pretty good job of shadowing the police wherever they go. The journalists then certainly had an inside track on what was going on.
I mean, the picture in that I find haunting. I find the whole thing just really unsettling and very sad. Patricia Docker wasn't the only victim who'd been at the Barrowland the night she was murdered. The second victim, Jemima MacDonald, and the third victim, Helen Puttock, had also been at the dance hall before they were killed and their bodies dumped. We clearly need to find out more about the Barrowland Ballroom and why it became a hunting ground for a killer. Author Nuala Norton has written about Glasgow's East End in the 1960s. Hello, you all right?
Hi.
I'm Vicky, nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
While former journalist Bob Jeffrey reported on Bible John for the Glasgow Herald.
So what was the Barrowland like?
This is like the working class hub of the city. Girls going out for a night out at the Barrowlands. They would tell the parents we're going somewhere else.
Okay.
Because the parents were going, you're not going to Barrowlands because it's the East End of Glasgow. They would worry that you're going to a rough part of town.
The first victim, Pat Docker, told her parents she was going to another dance hall called the Majestic, and her parents thought she was going there.
I've heard Thursdays was an over 25 night, and most people that went were married.
Yes.
After the first murder,
Yeah.
what was the big sort of change that you saw?
There was an element of trust and a carefreeness, and the whole Bible John murders ripped right through that. That changed everything in terms of women's safety and awareness. That was murder at the dance club.
And between the last two being close together, converted it into a serial killer, which is quite unusual.
So the nickname Bible John, where did that come from?
The newspaper I worked at that time had a crime reporter called John Quinn. He was a very, very eminent crime reporter, and John zeroed in on the fact that this guy did actually speak about the Bible and religion and so forth to his dance partners. And the news editor then said, oh, okay, why don't we just say Bible John?
It's become part of the myth. Have you got an artist's impression of what they thought Bible John looked like?
Yes. This fellow here, that everyone in Glasgow, to show them that today, they would just say Bible John. Very innovative to get an artist's impression done. All the newspapers printed it, and there were posters outside the shops. It does look like a real person.
Very detailed.
It's so good.
It is a very striking image, isn't it?
My instant reaction is he looks educated, he looks smart.
Yes.
That's a very unusual haircut for 1968.
Yeah.
It's like spectacularly unfashionable for that time.
Exactly.
I never expected him to look anything like that.
Your mother would go, oh, what a nice lad, he's got a Bible under his arm, but underneath he's a fanatic.
Yeah. Well, I think my question is, it's the obvious one, but why? These women had absolutely no connection to him. They were brutally murdered. What possessed him to think that's what he was going to do on that fatal night? Who is he, and why was he never caught? Glasgow, 1969, and serial killer Bible John has been on a killing spree. 3 women picked up at the Barrowland Ballroom are brutally murdered. But he's never caught, and it's very unusual for killers to simply stop killing. So was there a problem with the investigation? I want to hunt down any original police paperwork.
While I want to look into the detective who led the manhunt, what was he like?
I'm really interested in finding out more about this character, Joe Beattie, who led the investigation, what he was like, and how important he is in the story. Was he any good?
Marine murderer in Beattie.
It says here, a larger-than-life character, Beattie was part of a golden generation of officers who joined the police after serving with distinction in the Second World War. He's quite an impressive-looking guy. He's immaculately turned out. So this article here says that he was a distinguished and terminally inflexible Glaswegian detective. This one calls him legendary.
He was based at Partick Marine Police Station and had a team of over 50 officers.
He's very forward-thinking, especially for the time. He's commissioned a psychological profile. This is years before the term serial killer was even coined. There's no doubt in my mind that he really wanted to catch this killer. No two ways about it. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if it became a bit of an obsession with him, really.
So I've done some research and managed to get hold of some of the police reports. I'm very interested in, one, what their accounts are of what happened, but also how they were described. This is about Patricia Docker, who was the first victim. Deceased appears to enjoy the company of men and liked the attention of men. Now, my first reaction to that is, I enjoy the company of men. If you're a single woman, what is actually wrong with that? Here we're talking about Jemima MacDonald. She too was a single mother. She appeared to be extremely fond of male company and highly promiscuous. You know, she's had sex at least 3 times, so therefore she's fond of male company. Where have they got that information from? During the week ending Saturday the 16th of August 1969, Jemima was at the Barrowland Dance Hall on Thursday, Friday and Saturday evenings. She was in receipt of public funds plus maintenance from the fathers of her children. So it's as if they're saying she's going out 3 nights a week and she's spending all her money, all her benefits and the father's money for her children on her nights out. This next page is Helen Puttock, the 3rd victim. Mrs. Puttock was said to be fond of a good time. Brilliant, I love that, me too. She could consume a good amount of liquor without an effect on her. So could I. It was a habit of that and her sisters and friends to go to the Traders Tavern before going to the Barrowland. All 3 sisters are promiscuous and well known to a number of men who frequent the ballroom. I find it quite depressing, really. And I have no doubt this was written by a man. For the late 60s, where there's a serial killer that's still not been caught, the police have still not fully done the job, and yet they feel okay to talk about these women in a way where nothing's backed up. The reports are full of misogyny and victim blaming, and I'm not seeing any motivation to solve them. I want to try and get closer to these women and find out what they were really like. We're off to meet Jemima's son, Alan. Jemima was the second victim, and we're going to where he grew up. Mother of 3, Jemima MacDonald is murdered 18 months after the first victim, Patricia Docker. And again, she starts her night at the Barrowland Dance Hall. A partly clothed body was found in a derelict tenement just 20 yards from her own home. She had been beaten and strangled. She was a mother of 3, and Alan is her youngest. These conversations are the tough ones because, you know, how's it affected his life, his family's life? Hello, Alan.
Hi.
I'm Vicky. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So I hear that, are you a truck driver?
Yeah.
Nice. How big we talking?
The big ones.
The big ones? The ones that terrify me? So we're heading to your childhood home.
It's all changed from when I was a child.
Okay, I feel like we're close. So it'd have been this trip, really.
Yeah. All this would have been the old tenements. But there was old, scuffy, dirty.
Right, yeah.
Run down.
So how old were you when you left here?
7.
And is that how old you were when your mum died?
Yeah.
Yeah.
From what I remember of that day, we was out playing. We used to play in the old boarded up tenements and stuff. It was one of those rooms where she was supposed to have been found.
And that was close to where she lived with you?
Yeah, got told we had to get home. And we got dragged home, and then, what's it? Yeah, we just got told Mum was dead.
Take me a picture of your mum.
I can show you one.
Have you got a picture?
That's my mum with my sister.
Oh, can I have a look?
Yeah.
I haven't got my glasses on, so I'll have to...
It's fine.
Oh, that's a gorgeous photo. Just the way she's holding her makes you go, she's a loving mother.
She was.
Just happy. I mean, both smiling. It's a really beautiful, it paints a beautiful picture straight away.
She was. She was just, you know, she was left alone with 3 kids.
Yeah.
And did the best she could, just like most single mums do.
Yeah.
That is how I remember my mum. All the other garbage, what the press wrote and the police, I just ignore it. Because sorry, she was my mum.
Did you ever delve into any of the police reports?
Yeah, I read them and I just think the way that she was treated, the way that all the women was treated, was just totally disgusting by the police. You're judgmental.
Poor judgment, and also there's absolutely nothing wrong with...
Going out and enjoying yourself.
Absolutely. You know, if they were sort of in a petticoat in a stately home and that happened to them, brutally murdered, there'd be a very different picture painted.
Of course. You know, the chief constable would have been involved in saying, why, what's going on?
Yeah.
But because it was a low-class single mum who lived in the slums, as they were back then, they just weren't interested.
Alan was the sort of person that I grew up with, salt of the earth. I thought he was extraordinarily brave and really open. It's important for history not to be erased. And it's also important to try and set the record straight for the sake of the families of these 3 young women.
Whilst Vicky's been tracking down relatives of the victims, I've been finding out about the lead investigator in the Bible John case, Detective Superintendent Joe Beattie. Now I've arranged to meet someone who knew him well.
Hello, Arnett. Hey, Johnny, nice to meet you.
Arnott McWhinney was chief crime reporter for the Daily Record for 27 years.
What was your relationship like with the police?
I used to go to police stations, not to ask them things, but just to sit down in the CID room and chat away to them. I built up a good relationship with police. They could trust me and I could trust them.
Tell me a bit about Joe Beattie.
Joe was a lovely guy. He was a man's man. He was there all the time during this investigation, up at the crack of dawn, working on into the night. He was consumed by the whole thing.
Joe Beattie started work on the case after the third murder, Helen Puttock, on the 31st of October 1969. The mother of two had started her evening at the Barrowland Ballroom, just like the other two victims. And like Jemima MacDonald, she was estranged from her husband. Although on the night of the murder, Helen's husband George was staying with her family. But there's one major difference in Helen's case from the other two murders. Helen shared her taxi home with a man called John and his sister Jean.
This was the taxi journey that the third victim, Helen, took along with her sister Jeannie. It was her last journey. The sister left the taxi and Bible John proceeded with Helen. But the sister, Jeannie, was able to describe the perpetrator, what he was wearing,
Yes.
what he looked like, and she became a vital witness. In fact, the only real eyewitness to the whole thing. This is where it happened. This was the spot where Bible John took Helen Puttock in the taxi, dropped her off. Frankly, it's quite chilling to be here because all these years ago, she was raped, she was bitten in the wrist, there was blood. It was just a horrific scene. Our poor husband George, realising that there was something big going on, asked the detective what was going on, and they said, "What was your wife wearing?" And he told the policeman, and he was taken to the scene, and they identified his wife's body.
Bloody hell.
Fascinating to hear from Arnott McWhinney about how Helen Puttock's sister Jeannie was able to get such a good look at Bible John. And how, despite such a strong eyewitness, police were never able to pick him up. So what went wrong?
I'd like the posters out before this weekend. I would like you to do that, Mr. Wisher, before tomorrow.
We've arranged to meet the officer to whom Joe Beattie was talking in this footage from the 1960s, Ian Wishart.
Hi Ian.
Hello there.
I'm Vicky, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Ian, can you tell us what a late 60s murder investigation would have been like?
You would rely on publicity. But if a murder went on unsolved for more than a week, it became very difficult.
Yeah.
You see, nowadays, they would be looking for CCTV, they would be looking for DNA, they would be looking for everything. That didn't happen in the 60s. I was in a privileged position, and I was able to listen to the senior officers discussing what they did next. And on one occasion was present when the sister of Helen Puttock, Jeannie, came into the office to give a statement of what she remembered of Bible John. The very next day, that was released to the press. So a lot of folk were phoning in about John's. It very soon became apparent from the bouncers at the Barrowland Ballroom that half the men in there were married, shouldn't be there, and called themselves John.
I'd love to know about Joe Beattie led the investigation, what he was like.
I was a 25-year-old constable, and Joe Beattie looked like a god, you know.
Yeah.
Joe Beattie knew exactly what he was doing. He was very thorough, very impressive, and he worked his socks off. The only criticism has to come with the fact that he listened to Jeannie's description and as if it were gospel. The worry is, of course, that someone decided not to inform the police of someone they had suspicions of because he didn't fit the photograph. He wasn't called John.
Yes.
He wasn't religious. No one phoned in about Bible John and properly identified him.
So, Joe, he really believed in what Jeannie was telling him, didn't he?
Yes, oh, absolutely. He trusted her implicitly.
There's a lot to be admired in Beattie trusting Jeannie, but it maybe led the investigation down a potential rabbit hole.
Obviously, it's not satisfying at all that he wasn't caught, but how does that feel when you go, right, I'm satisfied, we've gone as far as we can with it, this is now a closed case? Did you feel that was the right time to close it?
Possibly, but it was opened again in the 90s.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That was a fascinating interview, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I think we need to figure out what happened in the 90s, why it was open.
Yes, what happened in the 1990s that made people sort of go, okay, there's fresh evidence come forward.
The other thing to come out of the conversation with Ian is about Helen's sister, Jeannie. Interesting that Ian said that the lead detective, Joe Beattie, was over-reliant on her, that he believed everything she said. We need to talk to someone who knew her.
Just have a wee seat here.
Jean died in 2010, but she was close to her cousin's daughter, Elaine Patterson.
Jean loved the dancing. She loved to party. She liked a wee drink. She was a party girl, which was a wee bit frowned upon.
And what was her experience of the police?
Jean was with the police for months and months. She spent a lot of time with Joe Beattie. She was their number one witness. But Jean was scared where she lived because she was worried that this so-called Bible John knew where she lived because she was the only witness. So she was terrified. So Joe Beattie got her out of Glasgow and got her a house in Irvine, which is down in the coast.
That's interesting.
So can you tell us about the night of Helen's murder?
That night, Helen went to the dancing with Jean and Helen's husband, George. He said, off you go. So off they went to the dancing, and George and Helen's mum sat up till about 11 o'clock, and she said, oh, I'm going to my bed. He said, I'm going to sit up until Helen comes in. He was in the living room.
And he didn't hear anything from there?
Now, the living room was at the corner of the building that looked straight along the street where she was murdered.
Oh, what?
And he never seen a taxi,
So-
and he never heard anything.
No,
And he was waiting up for her.
he was waiting up for her. Helen's mum, she always believed that he saw her, perhaps getting out a taxi with someone, and he's went down.
Really?
Really? Yeah. He could have left the house and everyone was in bed.
So did George ever get questioned?
I believe he did. I think they interviewed him, but I think because they were saying it was the one guy that murdered the 3 women, and he couldn't have murdered the other 2 because he was in Germany.
Blimey.
Wow, so the police did look into Helen's estranged husband, George, who was waiting up for her that night.
Elaine, it has been really lovely to talk to you.
Yeah.
And it's obviously under the saddest of circumstances. You know, here's hoping that one day there is There is justice.
Yeah,
And
there
only
is
hope.
justice for these women, yeah.
There's a lot of information in my head right now about this case. And Joe Beattie's interesting.
But also Jean, like he moved her to the coast. That's what you do like for top-end gangster cases.
Yeah.
Not like, you wouldn't think that for Scotland, would you? And a policeman having that power. But that's how much power you would have had, I suppose, you know?
Yeah.
And then like George is home and he's in the house and he's stayed up.
Like, there's some really odd details in there. I feel like there's more to it. In 1995, thanks to the emergence of new evidence and advances in DNA, the Bible John case was reopened.
We've tracked someone down from the reinvestigation team. He's currently overseas, so he's joining us on a video call.
Hello.
Morning, Brian.
How you doing, Brian?
Nice to meet you. How are you?
You were involved in the case in the 90s. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, all the files are held at Partick Police Office from the Bible John inquiry. We dug them out, but there was very little documentation to the Patricia Docker or Jemima MacDonald murders. Very little at all. But as far as Helen Puttock was concerned, we had reams of paperwork to go through. Initially, there was so many anomalies in the first few days of that inquiry, so we thought there's something not right here. Very early on, we were looking at the action book. Now, an action book in police terminology is a list of inquiries. You know, I'm giving you this action to go and look at this person. So you have this huge big book that says senior police officers and Joe Beattie went out to the Stonehouse, which is like in Lanarkshire, which is not far from Glasgow, to see a suspect. And they all went out on a Sunday morning, but they were all of senior rank.
Okay.
You don't send that amount of senior officers out unless they've got a really hot lead. But there was nothing on the action book. It just said it was done. No information on that. It was actually quite astonishing. So it transpired that they had some evidence found at the scene of Helen Puttock's murder. And it was a company card for the furniture company, Moylan's, out in Lanarkshire.
Oh, wow. A business card? Okay.
Our assuming name was shown on the card, but the card was missing from the exhibits and the paperwork.
So the card was found at the scene and then taken into evidence, but then later then was missing.
Yeah, we didn't have it.
Yeah. So what happened next?
So this is the card that took him out to interview a fellow called John Irvin McInnes. John Irvin McInnes worked for Moylan's, the furniture company. He was never ever put in front of an ID parade. He was never paraded. Nothing was ever shown to Jeannie as regards to John Irvin McInnes.
Wow.
Hugely suspicious.
So that's what started the whole 1995-1996 inquiry. We then started working from that. Who is John McInnes?
Johnny and I are with former police detective Brian Hughes, who was part of the Glasgow murder squad in the mid-1990s. At the time, the Bible John inquiry was reopened. Their investigations focus in on a man who is identified as being at the murder scene, but who was never formally questioned. John Irvin McInnes.
So it transpired that Joe Beattie was a close friend of a Detective Sergeant Jimmy McInnes. And they had worked together before in the old days of the flying squad. And we then ascertained that Jimmy McInnes worked on the Bible John inquiry.
Okay. Is there anything in the fact that Jimmy the detective and John had the same name?
Yes. They were cousins. Yes.
Were they? Okay.
So we started digging a wee bit in and eventually said, well, let's just go and interview the taxi driver who took this supposedly Bible John back with Helen Puttock to the area of the murder scene. The taxi was fingerprinted and there was no fingerprints lifted.
What? Really? The police didn't find any fingerprints in the taxi?
I don't know if you know, but the person that took the fingerprints was Jimmy McInnes.
Okay.
Detective Sergeant Jimmy McInnes. He did the taxi driver and the scenes of crime on the taxi. Alexander Hanna, the taxi driver, was never shown an ID parade.
Gosh.
So we got an old picture of John Irvin McInnes. What we did was we just put that along with 11 other pictures and we took it to Alexander Hanna and we showed him it. And he immediately, and I mean immediately, pointed straight to John Irvin McInnes and said, "That's the guy that was in the taxi."
Oh, wow.
It was incredible. It really was.
So, John Irvin McInnes was the man in the taxi, whose description Jeannie had given to the police, and who had accompanied her and her sister Helen home from the Barrowland Ballroom. By 1995, John Irvin McInnes had taken his own life, so Brian and his team, in what was Scotland's first ever exhumation of a murder suspect, exhumed McInnes's body for DNA testing.
But a comparison of his DNA and the semen found on Helen Puttock's tights was inconclusive. Brian then turned his attention to his other key suspect, Helen's estranged husband, George.
We have George, a jealous man. When Helen came home in the taxi, George was up. George was awake. So George Puttock would have seen Helen and Bible John get out the taxi. Is it possible, how can you put this, for maybe a sexual activity or something like that? So it happened very quickly. He's come down and caught them. And this is where the rages happened. John McInnes was seen running away.
Do you think George caught John and Helen and there was a sort of an altercation there?
That's our theory, yes.
That certainly feels like the right fit from where I'm stood, where George was waiting up and now we know that he was awake when she arrived in the taxi and witnessed her walking off with another man. That feels legit to me.
But of course, as we learnt earlier, George was in Germany for the first two murders, which is why he'd been eliminated from the initial police inquiry.
And in your mind, the two previous murders are just both separate murders?
Yes. We don't believe that John Irvin McInnes was a murderer. We just don't. We are absolutely 100% certain. And as are a lot of the detectives as well, that they've worked on it,
Yeah.
These three murders were not connected. Not in any matter of means were they connected. It was three individual murders. Bible John is a myth. There is no such person as Bible John.
Okay.
No forensic evidence is ever found against George Puttock, and he was never arrested. And despite everything Brian and his team uncovered, the Crown Office and Strathclyde Police took no further action on any of the findings.
Now that was fascinating.
Wasn't it?
They've been on a bit of a journey where I've just gone, okay, wow, this chap Brian was obviously right across it and really bright man has pulled back the covers decades later and gone, actually, possibly is three different people.
He can't say who committed the first two murders, but he has a strong idea on who killed Helen Puttock, her jealous ex-husband, George.
You have to follow your gut. And I think what's been interesting is, meeting family members which have said, well, in my gut, it was George. In my gut, it wasn't Bible John.
Yeah, I agree that it's a pathetic bogeyman. That's all Bible John is now.
Yeah.
For me. But can you imagine what it was like at that time? The clamour, the press, the other policemen, the theories, the public. Joe Beattie never come up with the term Bible John. It was the press. And it was the worst nightmare for Joe Beattie. Because suddenly the pressure on him was massive. So the police were kind of playing this dance with somebody the press would create this character, and he had to produce somebody that was going to be found guilty for the 3 murders.
However, you know, the police not looking into the case and the evidence, weak, lazy investigations here, you know, not pulling in the right people because they were connected to Joe Beattie. Whether Joe Beattie was actively at the heart of a cover-up due to the connection between one of his officers and suspect John Irvin McInnes, or was just under intense pressure, we shall never know. But we've been put in touch with a contact who might be able to tell us more. Hi.
Hello.
I'm Vicky.
Nice to meet you, I'm Jonathan.
Nice to meet you, Jonathan. Actor Jonathan Watson lived next door to Beattie before he died.
I can remember one day looking outside and there was a Granada TV van parked outside his front door. And when the opportunity arose, I said to him, I said, Joe, what's this with a Granada TV van? And he said to me, he said, oh son, he said, the only murder I didn't solve is the only one they want to talk about. I was in charge of the Bible John murders.
Wow, okay.
I felt quite privileged to have him as a neighbour. He was a great guy. When he passed away, I went to his funeral. His was mobbed, absolutely rammed. And I was up the back, and I was in amongst all these old Glasgow coppers who were all really big men, but also there was loads of old Glasgow gangsters who came out as a mark of respect.
Really?
Yeah. I've never seen so many velvet collared coats in all my life.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting journey. Like, I've had my reservations about Joe. There was certain things with Joe that we've since discovered with his connections to John
McInnes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard this. In the short time that I knew Joe, I can't imagine him. There's no way Joe would cover that up. But what he did tell me before he passed away was he thought that with the passage of time and the lack of leads, he'd come to the conclusion that it was very likely to be more than one individual that carried out the murders.
He did say that, did he?
He did. He thought there was a chance that there'd be maybe a couple involved.
That's interesting.
So, yeah.
It's like a roller coaster.
Like 1 minute.
Yeah.
And then you meet somebody that knows him personally.
I know. And there's a human being there.
And there's a human being there.
Yeah. And it's a shame because Joe Beattie's, it obviously weighed heavy on him. This was the one case that he didn't or couldn't solve.
Yeah.
And did he know?
Yeah.
I think he did, because he said to him, I think it was more than one.
Yeah.
I think he knew.
Yeah. This case had such a big effect on Glasgow. It's still something people here are talking about. That's how big it was, and still is. I'll never get those women's names and faces and stories out of my mind.
Ultimately though, Glasgow as a city came through this and became the amazing place it is today. European city of culture, a tourist city with a thriving modern people. And Bible John was just a press invention, something used to frighten children.
There was no justice given. That's what really irks me. The people who did that, they weren't brought to justice. So he can be consigned really to history as a ghoul.
Absolutely. Next time.
There's racial disharmony.
They walked into this cultural clash.
No one had been murdered up until that point, so that marked something new.
This is a lynch mob murder.
Getting justice is the priority.
There's just a web of lies.
Yeah, it's just appalling justice.
That was the biggest cover-up going.